Hey, hey, we're the monkeys, and we're just monkeying around. What's up, bitches? Sorry about the background. Everything's finally set up in the new place, but as I have been working on a couple of things here, I'm going to flip the camera around. This is one of the things that we have been working on. Let me go back to the main page. Now, for many who have never seen AD&D Second Edition, you have no idea what the setting is. I briefly touched in this setting that this is a possible reprint that Wizards of the Coast is going to end up doing. Oh, let's go back to... here we go. So let's bring up, I believe that, nope, that is the book we already have open. So the book cover that I was wanting to bring up is this one. So this is the book that I pulled primarily a lot of stuff out of. From everything that I see here, you know, there was talk of this having to be reprinted as being culturally sensitive. Um, I've taken a look through the book, and I have not seen anything that is culturally insensitive. Um, I'll break it down to you this way. What sets an Al-Qadim campaign apart from standard D&D? So in Al-Qadim, imagine that you are in the middle of the desert, um, and there is this race of people that live there. They are separated into two cultural classes. The Let me see if I can remember the proper terms. But essentially, what these terms are referring to are like nomads and city dwellers. So the Al Badia, which are like nomads, so they roam the desert. They're raiders, but when I say that, I have to strongly stop and go. These are raiders with a moral and honor-based system. That's everything that dominates Al-Qadim. That's one of the big things that separates it from a D&D campaign. In a D&D campaign, your opponents would not have qualms against swooping in and destroying an entire caravan and carrying away women. But in an Al-Qadim adventure, your enemies wouldn't touch the women. They may steal camels. They may, if you kill one or two of them and, their families may disagree, you may have a sudden new group of antagonists that your party's fighting because, they opposed you killing their family member. So it's, I've taken notes on a good portion of it, and I will go through a little of what I have here. One of the big things that this campaign setting has is that it can be dropped into any campaign world from what I was seeing. So with the interior, it's 70-80% desert, volcanic wastelands, salt flats, rocky uplands, ruddy cliffs, mountains, steppes. So, that's the other, 20 to 30%. The rest of it's desert. There's not much rainfall. Adventurers in this land, are amongst ruins of old kingdoms, genie-built wonders in desolate places. Maybe they work as a caravan, linking cities going oasis to oasis, or having to find water supplies. There's all kinds of, it gives you some ideas as well. In the Arabian Adventures book with a couple stories at the end that, are reminiscent of, 1001 Nights. Let's see here. As I stated, the lifestyle is split between nomads and non-nomads. The nomads are al-Badia, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly because I sat there and I tried to spend a lot of time learning this pronouncement. They dwell on the hostile lands, seeking out food and water and grazing lands. They consider themselves rich not in goods, but in their independence, but still have to do trade with the other half. Um, the or again, I apologize if I mispronounce any of these. The Al Hadarhar. I'll have to take a look at it. But basically, the city dwellers, they're artisans, merchants, craftsfolk, farmers, wealthy men or women with land in other places worked by lower class citizens. The Hadar are the most part poor and live in mud brick or thatched reared walls, wells, and oases. Are usually what they're gathered around. Um, Farmers reside on lands by others and work for part of the crop station, plays a big part in their society. Many women live as pampered slaves or prisoners, as opposed to like the nomads, where every person pitches in. So, like, a woman is in, she's still a woman, but she pulls her weight in their society as an equal. It's like I said, this is not a standard D&D setting. This is based off of, a lot of Middle Eastern cultures, so they try to be very sensitive with it. Um, as I said, the city dwellers think that they are more cultured and civilized than their nomad brethren. They worship gods in impressive mosques that with educated priests to guide them and have since settled. The city dwellers believe themselves to be more pious because they have these grand mosques, they have these educated priests, but on the same side, like the nomads, they believe that they are more pious because they live a more austere life in their nomadic ways. Um, and they also, they argue that they live a holy existence under the expanse of heaven and placed at the God's mercy. They pity the city dwellers for their softness with material possessions, with their lack of freedom. They bow down to no one but gods, and also believe themselves as all equals before the gods, before fate. And as I said, women are more free as they are needed in the order to help the tribe survive. Um, Despite the differences between them, they coexist peacefully and believe that a man or woman should be judged on their own merit, which that's the way their culture works. They also have similarity. They have more similarities between the two groups than what separates them. Um, they have a common language, which is known as Madini. Ethics and behavior, as well as honor, family, hospitality, purity, and piety, basically all are like the mainstays of what makes a character in this campaign. So, like, honor is considered like honesty, kindness, forgiveness, generosity to those deserving, protection of the weak, faithful to one's friends, and loyal to their family. Honor and kinship go hand in hand. This man's dishonorable actions may stain his family's reputation for generations. Same thing goes for women. Um, every defense, every offense, depending on how severe, has a restitution and a punishment. So a thief would have to pay back, or he would, like, a public apology and then lose a finger or part of his hand, and it's usually the right hand because that's the hand that they use to eat with. um that's also like one of the strong cultural things is, or no, is it, I can't remember. Let me take a look at that. I know that there is specifically one hand for eating, so I mean that's one of the common things that they will remove. Oh, excuse me, I believe I was correct. It's everyone eats with their right hand. So a thief may lose several fingers off the right hand, so that anybody that is his host can be able to tell that this person was a thief. Um, let's see. Theft is punishable by severing fingers. I got to that. Murderer is answerable by the death of the killer, by the family, unless compensation is made, and sometimes that means coins, lands, livestock. Amorous impropriety is the only crime punishable by death. So the standard concept of a D&D adventurer getting drunk and making sweet, sweet love to the bartending maid is out of the question. So that will get you death. So that's one of the big things with this. There's no real system behind the culture as a raider who steals someone's wife on a camel raid will find themselves struck down by their brothers, sparing the offending raider's family honor. Women are often accused of impropriety as maid. Men are no more exception. So a lot of women they'll face these accusations. Honor killings. This is one of the things I set aside in my notes. This campaign has a setting, has a concept as a promised girl falls into the lure of love of another. The man that lured her away from the one that she was intended to, or from her family, he could face death. So could she. They could be banished to the desert, or one of the other things that I found in this campaign setting is the return to what a lot of medieval cultures did, which were tests of faith. So, like, they would put the man and the woman in separate wells, and they would feed them minimal food and coffee for 40 days. If either one or both of them survived, they were considered having holy grace and being spared punishment any further. Um, the other thing is blood feuds. This breaks out, as I explained this earlier in my few minutes ago. This breaks out as one group kills another, and it's viewed by the family as unjust and kills one of the offending family's members, and continues into a third party, and it's only until a third party intervenes and negotiates a monetary compensation. So that means for characters, you could find yourself drawn into a blood feud between two families, or you could find yourself being the negotiator between them. Family is a very big concept. It's precious and irreplaceable even in death and afterlife. It remains intact. So it provides the culture with a strength and importance of who they are, since wealth is transcendent in the desert, and what you have today you can lose tomorrow, but family is eternal. Each person exists within a kind of like a given circle. So you'll have, your intermediate family, which would be, your mother, your father, your siblings. And then link to your mother and father are their siblings and their mother and father, and then vice versa. So it creates all these little rings that are basically linked together and form greater social circles. So even though mom might be married, her brothers may come and visit every so often, or one of her sisters may come in the company of her husband. Um, things like that, and vice versa. So families are led by males. Daughters, I hate to say this, a daughter's in charge of, pretty much one of two things depending on the lifestyle of the family, which, could be a craft, which could be being married away. I hate to say it, but those are the two options, as well as like the third, which is becoming an adventurer. Um, So the oldest family member, which in this case would be a grandfather or great grandfather, is in charge of all the family members until they're married. Then his sons usually live with them until they're 30 or they're married. Um, Sometimes it says that a good lot of times when they are married, they will stay within the same house, which will create a larger home. Um, and it creates a new circle. As I explained, the bride's brothers would still visit and watch over her. One of the big concepts here is divorce is something that is common. So, like, a marriage could last a day, a marriage could last a week, a month, either way, but a marriage is sacred. So, breaking marriage bonds can refer back to punishment. Um, One of the other things with this campaign is there's large families. So, a lot of times, if a son is unmarried, he will leave the home, but he won't necessarily leave the village. So he'll live separately, but near his family within the same village. So again, creating like another circle. Um, as I stated here, that's something that city dwellers as well as like the nomads do. So, like a nomadic patriarch would have like a very large tent, and it'd be several tents that are hooked together with sections for, his sons, his wife, daughters, So it separates gender as well as, allowing for mixed interactions within certain settings, such as eating, things like that. Um, Married sons often live in smaller tents within a few feet of their father's tents, depending on the size of their family. This can lead to very large tent cities whenever the nomads travel. Loyalty to one's immediate family and then to the next circle, which so as a wronged party may turn to their cousins for help, and they would be honor bound to help them. Doing so would be a dishonor to their family or immediate family. Um, One of the other things that I spoke about is like how there's no making sweet love to the bartender. So purity is something that plays a big part into it. I said divorce was common and it's readily accepted, and finding new spouses with no stigmata to any party. Thus, as I explained, if it's only a few days, a month. But for unmarried people, physical contact between a man and a woman, unless marriage is avoided, if you're a wounded man and like a woman happens to pass by, she's not gonna just ignore you. She's gonna lend you aid. Um, but when you first meet a woman, you wouldn't shake her hand because it's he would assume that she's improper, or he might be violently tempted by her charms instead. So like a nod in some situations. Um, One of the things that I also pointed out here is that the campaign has a setting adjustment, so there can be areas where even a flirtatious look can be viewed as an insult. There are some areas that have varying or levels of purity that I have noticed as I've been going through the book and making notes. Um, One of the big things, and in the Al-Qadim, they refer to these people as Zakarans. They have a peculiar belief that every man and woman has a weakness where matters of the heart come into play. Thus, women wear veils, don robes to hide their figures, and in some groups, it's also acceptable for men to wear robes and they hide their bodies and cover their faces as well. Sometimes it would be just a lower face. For women, it would be the full face. Um, See, this goes as far as wearing opaque hoods in public, gloves, shoes. This has caused the eyes, hands, and feet to be considered objects of beauty. So eyeliners, tattoos of the forehead, nail colorations, and bracelets on ankles and wrists are common in areas where they're not so like, you're drawing attention to yourself. You know, um, this purity also leads to separate quarters for men and women, and quarters for a man and a wife, then quarters where both genders can mix under the watch of each other's family, which usually they are the same family. Law of hospitality allows for a wife to provide for an honored or needy guest, but may retire to her quarters depending on the station once her husband arrives. Like I said, not a standard setting. One of the big things that I noticed here, or I noted, was like hospitality. Hospitality plays a big part into it. So it would require, if someone came to your house, you'd offer them a meal, and usually sometime within that meal, it would have salt, or like it may not have salt, depending on how this guest you want them to stay long or you don't want them to stay. Conversation, you don't serve them anything with salt, because then you have to let them stay for 3 days. Then you have to give them a large meal and then two separate smaller meals until they're gone on the third, which it's impolite to pass by that third day. If you overstay your welcome, it cause big problems unless you're a traveler. In that case, one of the exceptions to the rule is that your host may hire you on as like a merchant to work their stall, maybe settle a dispute, you know, which leads to a lot of adventurers going to stay in mosque and going to stay in hospice. That's one of the things that I noticed within the core book. It notated. Once you become someone's guest, they You never overstay your welcome. You stay on your good behavior. Don't draw a weapon unless it's in defense of your host. Um, like I was talking about the bond assault, that's a 3 day. You could stay and be my guest. Hiring hiring your guest, is a loophole in that. Um, Sometimes, depending on your host and probably the guest familiarity, salt is not needed for that stay, is one of the things that it also noted. Um, One of the big staples for the campaign as well is piety. Everybody believes in something. If you don't believe in anything, then they don't think that you have a moral anchor and they consider you a barbarian. Um, they also consider this level of piety, just the same as any D&D campaign world, that their gods judge them on the piety that they have exhibited throughout life. So, I mean, it lists that there are a good lot of gods. There are minor gods, major gods. I won't bore you with some of them because some of these are actually in the 3.0, 3.5 book, Sandstorm. You can also, as I said, be able to find these books on drivethroughrpg.com. Um, one of the one of the bigger things, in addition to the gods, is this belief in fate. That fate is this preordained situation and kind of viewed as like fate is viewed as like a god. So she's like a goddess. And she passed down like this law or like all her wisdom to genies and deities and mortals, then left it with a young girl. And it lays out like this whole entire code about the honor, the family, and everything. So, where this also plays in is that, like 500 years from the time that this was done, the founder of the Grand Empire that is set up in the Al-Qadim books. You can use the same system for any campaign world that you want to fit it into, but it primarily lays out that the Grand Caliph's ancestor was this desert nomad who found these scrolls and then basically traveled the land spreading the wisdom. And fate is viewed as like a goddess. Also, one of the things within this game or this setting is the ability of characters to basically be like, okay, like you find yourself like in an alley and the Shah's men are packing in with swords drawn, and a character might, if depending on how many times your character has done it before, or if you're familiar with the rule, this is an option which lets you basically call on fate. You roll percentage dice. If it's a 1 or a 2, fate intervenes on your behalf. It's not a free get out of jail card. It's like, all of a sudden the captain of the guard yells out, "Oh, take him alive!" So that would be considered calling upon fate. Um, so that all plays into how they believe, about fate and how it works in their favor and not in their favor. So it's another new concept to a campaign. The other thing that they state here is that it's 85% human, 15% other race. And the other 15% race is like on a wild varying scale for AD&D. So you have dwarves, elves, gnomes, halflings, orcs, goblins, gnolls, and ogres. So like an ogre could be he could be a judge because it's not based off intelligence, it's based off of wisdom. Or you might get gnolls that you're used to seeing them as warriors, so instead now they might be thieves. It gives you a lot of different interesting options And these nomads don't just have to be humans. So half elves and half orcs are common. You'd see them in nomads. You'd see where there's orcs, there's going to be half orcs. So that's one of the things that you could think about if you ever decide to use anything like this setting. Um, it's strongly pointed out that it's an basically a lot of those old racial hatreds have fallen away. So dwarves, no longer get their attack bonuses to goblins, and vice versa for gnomes and halflings, goblins, orcs, they all lose that ability. Um, one of the big things is that is also station. Um, so because you have such a wide spring between, the poor, the merchants, thieves, like it there's all these different social classes and how like these stations and everything play into it. So like merchants, they have their own social setting. Um, so you would have, basically merchants that know of thieves, and depending on how well the thief is, they may be paying them this little bit of courtesy. It's like, oh, that is that's Kalam Ashad. This character might have like station points of like 11, and he comes up to a merchant who has a station point of 8. It's not that he's going to defer to him, but it's going to be one of those things of he's still a rogue and this is still a merchant. So there's still like this strong separation, and it allows for parties to come from like different groups. So like you might have somebody who is a thief, you might have somebody who's a merchant, you might have somebody in the party who is like their version of like, a cleric, and between the three of them the cleric would do the talking. The other two would defer to the cleric, and depending, on the setting and the cities how it's set up. There's a big changeover in the way that the classes work as well. Druids disappear, paladins disappear from the setting. Let me see, what else was it? Let me see. There's no paladins. There are, let's see, no druids, and some of the classes that they have set up are a little different. They introduce things such as like the concept as people who live inside cities don't ride animals, even their warriors don't, versus the nomads who are just trained in it. So you get different kits. You get things like I took some of the notes here. Well, I won't get into the classes because that's a whole entire boring system, but basically it changes the way that the warrior class or the fighter class works. It eliminates the animal handling, things that deal with the animals, and instead you get, reading and writing and other type skills that are focused in. Because the paladin disappears, you get what's known as the Faris. They, for lack of a better term, they are paladins, but they lack, that the paladin abilities. Basically, they're just holy warriors. You get slave soldiers, which are Mameluke. The Mamelukes are not only soldiers that serve either the city state, the small empire, the kingdom. They are also civil workers. So they would build wells, repair roads, things like that. Um, Sorcerers are a package that's introduced. So is the Element Mage. One of the newer ones that they have are the Ashar. And basically, these are, for lack of a better term, pseudo wizards that deal with genies. Instead of getting a normal familiar, you would get an elemental familiar. And You can't make magic items, but you can ID and use genie items that are created by them. You can be able to summon genies later on. The rogue kit has a few changes. You have the barber, which is, a dentist, a person that shaves your face, your head. They're seen as like gossip mongers, basically. You get beggar thieves. You get. I haven't taken a look into it, but you get basically an assassin package, which is like the Holy Slayer. Um, One of the other kits. Some of these kits don't follow over because of the way that the difference between second edition and third edition work. You get the Saluk scoundrels, which are free adventurers that doesn't have to apply to rogues. The same thing with the Holy Slayer class. It listed as being rogue, but then they list in other classes that could follow into it. Merchant thieves don't have to be rogues because the way that kits work is that you take the class and then it modifies that class in a certain way. So merchant thieves were listed as being like a rogue. Um, the Roans, which are desert bards, bards don't exist in the traditional manner in this campaign setting. I didn't see them because in the second edition, they were still considered a kit and not a separate class. Um, if you guys ever want me to be able to explain that way that kits and classes work, I would be more than happy to do the research and be able to come back and tell you, because I know a lot of people have not encountered second edition. But I'll move on here. Hikimas, which are a female-only cleric class, which has a special ability to be able to discern lines, be able to tell what class somebody is, even if you're trying to hide it. They are also able to see through, I believe they said it was illusion spells and basically any deception. They do offer a version of druids which are known as Kain or Idol Priest. So they get a lot of the druidic qualities. They believe that, everything in the wild has a spirit, and they have idols that they worship that are devoted to these things. And then, like, one of the other kits that they set up, which is called, like, the Mystic. So it's like a cleric kit, and it's just basically this free wandering spirit that answers to the gods. Um, Let me see. I've already told you guys about calling upon fate. If you roll badly, fate can turn against you. Clerics in this setting, if you use that calling on fate, you'll want to donate a little something to the gods. In addition to the calling upon fate rule, one of the things that they have here, which is known as the evil eye. So, one of the backgrounds that they give to why people are so humble and so honorable and everything is this evil eye. Pride and success can be dangerous in Al-Qadim, especially for those who boast. Essentially, if the player characters are praised and fail to respond with humility and modesty, just make a wisdom save. They don't give a DC for it. I believe that may be one of those AD&D tables of what your wisdom save must be based on your character level. Or it may be hidden somewhere within another book that I have here on the computer. So basically, if you fail this save, you become cursed with a -2 penalty to new encounters. So the classic, you enter a town, and the DM rolls for the civilization's initial attitude towards you. So that would be something that in this campaign setting you would get negatives to. Um, I've started into like the culture and everything here. I've stressed that tolerance is a big thing for race and belief in the gods. But if you don't believe in gods, you're a filthy, filthy barbarian. How dare you? Um, I discussed how a man will live in the house of his father or his grandfather. These families may have houses that are connected for generations. One of the big setting differences here is that city dwellers in Al-Qadim basically live by the sound of the gong. So, like, in the morning, the gong sounds the call to prayer. You may be up an hour before that because you've shaved, you've bathed, so that you can be able to go. So then, you go to prayer service, then you come back, you eat a light and cold breakfast. If you live in a colder environment, you'll eat a soup. Um, Most of this is like cold, curdled cheese, bread, olives, dates. Um, but one of the things that really, really ties people is the drinking of coffee. Um, Agriculture and crafting make up a big part of city dwellers. Then 2 hours before noon, there's a call to prayer again with a gong. You know, Not everybody's required to go to temple, but some do. Um, some turn and nod their head in prayer, depending on how, fervent they are in their beliefs. Um, After that, after lunch, a lot of people they retreat from the open markets into the closed markets because by this time it's heated. Um, those that get lunch would be a leftover dinner and a soup or bread, onions, dates, or stew bought from a vendor. Um, Once it starts cooling down in the afternoon, it starts being almost the same. Some people still engage in business, some use it for business meetings and commerce. In the covered market, a lot of people will have sections set aside. There'll be people who will be publicly speaking or telling stories. Of course, the town guard will have a cleric with them just to keep people from, saying anything blasphemous or obscene or saying anything like that can view as revolutionary speech. Um, Entertainers are present. So, some entertainers, they will approach people and basically try to get a free meal for the evening in exchange for, entertaining them in whatever fashion that they have. Um, usually about in the evening hours when it's dinner time, they will return home. They will wash, and master of the house will say grace. Depending on how wealthy the family is, like this is still like the largest meal. So those that are richer will have more meat in their diet. Those that are poorer will have more like things like rice, more vegetables maybe. But one of the bigger ties, like I was saying, is coffee. Coffee is served or it's prepared. It may be prepared by a servant, but no matter what, the master of the house, unless you're like the grand caliph or like a ruler who appoints somebody to pour the coffee, and then it's considered an honor. Um, just like Middle Eastern cultures here and some sub-Saharan African cultures, um, eating is done with the right hand. Everything's scooped or, eaten into flatbreads. Um, After that, they wash their hands. Tales are told. So basically, this is a very subdued setting if you're a city dweller because 2 hours after sundown, the gong rings again, which is evening prayers. The pious go off to pray. It's not required. Many people have prayer service within their house. Um, After that, most people will retire for the evening. Um, and then you may be encountering the night watch and the judges and everything, and you may spend some time in jail. So, I've discussed how the Grand Caliph rules it all, but below him is like a system of basically whatever title that they want to call themselves, whether it's a king, emir, a pasha, sultans, khedives. They all rule a certain level of autonomy, but they still pay taxes and pay homage to the Grand Caliph. Um, in the social structure between the common people and these rulers are the khedives who are judges. They basically sit there and settle things the same way our judges do, but most of the time it's land grants, disputes between merchants, things like that, as well as your normal crime and punishment. Um, these judges are usually picked by people who, if your family has lived in a village for a very long time, and you're very have a very nice, and very esteemed reputation. A member of your family could be a judge, or you could end up being picked as a judge based on, your merits. Um, One of the other things is agriculture. In order for people to be stationary, they have to have agriculture. So this can range from anything from like a garden to like a very large garden. Um, Most of those are set up on land grants. There's two types. There's temporary, which are either until they're not able to pay, the person leaves, and the amount of time is up. The larger ones are granted to families, which means like a family could live on a block for several generations and build a bigger and bigger house, or they may own a plot of land. Usually, it requires a larger payment, but then like it stays in effect, till they can't pay their taxation or the last male family member dies off. Sorry, women, I apologize. It's not my setting. I didn't write it. Every culture has its rules. You know, One of the big things I was talking about was tolerance. So elves, dwarves, and gnomes are all given pretty good places. There's a high respect for authority. I've started getting into like the attire and everything. Some of the crazier aspects of people dress, which is still it's given the standard, you, depending on your wealth, you may wear drawstring pants. You might wear like a nice set of pants that come down to your ankles or your knees, and you have a sash. You wear your shirt and your overrobe, which I can't remember the name of off the top of my head. You wear a sash around your waist, which is usually where you tuck things, or you tuck it inside your shirt rather than inside your sash, and it forms its own pockets. So things like weapons, coins, tobacco, light stuff like that is stored there. Um, Middle class, you start seeing things like a little bit more layering of clothing with more, a bigger sash, fancier sash, actual purses instead of handkerchiefs that have coins tucked into them, more a little bit more flashier of robes and pants. You see them basically sit there. What was it listed as? It's a leather stockings that cover the feet, and it's attached to the pants, usually at whatever length that it is. So if it's from the knee, it's from there. If it's from the ankle, it's like a shoe. Then you usually wear a sandal over it and boots, depending on how far you're going. Boots are for longer distances, and they're usually loose, so it doesn't be able to really like keep body heat trapped. In climate weathers, you would wear like another robe over that with another sash. So kind of gives you an idea of what the campaign setting is. So one of the things that I will note is that there is a change over not only in the values of your enemies, but I'm going to bring up one of the other books that I bought here. I'll flip the camera around for those that have never seen it. So, we have this beauty bought off drivethrurpg.com. First set of new monsters for your Al-Qadim campaign. I have not gone through this book. Not gonna lie. But just looking at it here with you, or you know what? I have gone through this and it has been a while. There are so many interesting things in here for 74 pages. Because this is back when genies were, not just tasked into these, subsets. Now, when you look back at AD&D, you get these completely different style of genies. And these are supposed to be your only set of monsters that you use beyond, like, that supplement list that they give. And I think there may be a supplement list in here. Oh, look at that. That's pretty cool. If I've seen this before, I haven't. I forgot it. Wow. Then a shape-shifting humanoid that can turn into an animal or a rock. Half a humanoid with one arm, one leg, half a face, half a torso, and one wing. I mean, this is, it's magic stuff here. And with the third edition rules, some of those monsters could probably be played over. And then, of course, here we go. So this was the monster addendum rule that I was talking about. That it gives you a list of, other monsters that are proper in the setting. It sets you up for your encounter tables. That's one of the things about AD&D is you didn't have to worry about an encounter table. You could just take it right out of the book. This is more of this awesome, this mind-blowing artwork from AD&D. No offense to third 3.0 fifth edition artists, there was a certain magic to these AD&D book pictures when it was a full page, or even if it occupied just part of a page. That was one of the things is things like this. Let me flip her back around here. I have yet to see any modern book that will fill out the pages with filigree like this. And again, another half picture. It gives you these three warriors locked in close combat with a combat scene going on behind. It's black and white. It's not color, but it gives you something here, And almost every page in an AD&D book was like this. That's one of the things that is just mind-blowing. Of course, the rest of this book goes in the campaign setting, but so a lot of these concepts and stuff don't change because between the nomads and the people that live in the cities. I think I've mentioned a few of them here. Or rather, I'll get into that here in a second. So, the nomads versus, the settled people, their lifestyle's a little different. Now or before dawn, they rise, they wash, they all face the central direction that, the Grand Caliph built his first city and pray, praying for guidance and good fortune. It's a handful of dates and some milk for each person. The tribe has sheep and it is not summer. The children are boys sent out basically shepherd. It sounds like a pretty basic, it says they all own camels. I haven't gotten into this portion of the book, so I will leave this for part 2.